This is the Zhiyun Cinepeer Weebill 3E. The Zhiyun Cinepeer Weebill 3E is an incredibly lightweight gimbal with a ton of great features like Bluetooth shutter, easy vertical video shooting, and up to 16 hours of runtime off a less than 3-hour charge. We're going to get into all of that and more in this video, but first I must say that Zhiyun did send me this gimbal to try out and review. They have no control over what I say, and they don't get to see the video before it goes live. So if you find this review helpful, you can use the link down below and the code BradWest to get 10% off, and that really helps to support the channel. Okay, let's take a look at this bad boy, shall we? So when these little tripod legs are off, this gimbal weighs about 990 grams. It feels high quality, and this light gray sort of color is actually quite a nice change from just having something that's totally black. Let's have a look at the controls. You have the power button, an OLED screen, a joystick, a record button, a mode button, and a menu button with a dial to adjust settings. You also have a scroll wheel on this side with a trigger button as well. There's also a camera control port as well if your camera doesn't support Bluetooth shutter control. Each of the 3 axes have a lock, which is nice. You can unlock them to pack the gimbal away or lock them in place to make balancing a lot easier. This is not a balancing tutorial, but a general rule of thumb for balancing any gimbal is to start with the tilt motor, balance this first, then you balance the roll motor, and once you've got that balanced, you can balance the pan motor, and your camera should stay in any position you put it if it's properly balanced. Let's go ahead and turn this guy on. Anytime you've changed your setup, whether you've changed the lens or the camera or added filters or done anything like that and balanced the gimbal, you'll want to go ahead into the menu, go into the motor settings and choose auto just to fine tune the motor. While the motor is being auto-tuned, let's have a look at the menu. The menu system on this gimbal is pretty basic in the sense that you don't have the touch screen that some of the other gimbals have, but to me that doesn't really matter because what I want is a gimbal that's easy to use and that works well. The Zhiyun Cinepeer Weebill 3E menu is easy to navigate, it's responsive, and at the end of the day, that matters more to me than what the menu looks like. So if I hit the menu button, we've already adjusted the motor. I can go into advanced settings, and here I can change all the gimbal responses. So speed, the smoothness, the deadband, tracking, all those kind of things. Let's say I go into speed. I have 2 options, control and follow. Control is talking about the movement of the joystick, and follow is how the gimbal responds to my movements and how it follows my movements. So you go into control, you could adjust the tilt, roll, and pan by just pressing this dial in and adjusting the values like that. And then once I'm happy with whatever values I've set, I can just hit the menu button to go back, and those settings will be saved. I can go into here to activate the Bluetooth shutter. There you can see it says Brad A7 Mark III, and I'm already connected to that. So now if I hit the little record button here on the gimbal, it activates the shutter via Bluetooth on the camera. It's such a small thing, but I love the fact that I can hold the gimbal with 2 hands and shoot instead of, taking one hand off the gimbal to hit record and to come back down. I can just use my thumb to hit the record button to start and stop recording. Now another control we have on the gimbal is this little wheel function, and by default that's set to roll, so you can change the roll axis of the camera. Now, I find that while I'm shooting and I'm holding the camera like this, because I sometimes use the trigger, I sometimes bump this roll wheel and tilt the camera. Sometimes it's so slight that I almost don't notice it in the moment, and then my horizon is slightly off, as you can see in this shot. It's not a biggie though, because I can come into the menu and under wheel function, I can change that from roll to off. And now if I adjust the wheel, nothing happens to the roll axis. You can also change a couple of other settings here in this menu. So if you want to dive deep into the menu and customize this gimbal the way you want it to operate, you can do that. Often when I'm shooting, I like to use the joystick to create parallax movements. So I'll move the gimbal to the left and I'll move the joystick to the right to create a little parallax movement like that. Now, when I'm done with that, I like to quickly go back into a normal mode again, or a normal position. So I can do that by just double tapping the trigger, and then the camera will point in the forwards direction again. So let's go have a look at some of the other modes on the gimbal. You can hit the mode button to change through them. We have pan follow, lock, and follow. So if we start with pan follow, essentially what that does is the gimbal will follow any pan movements that you do. But if you tilt the camera up and down, the camera remains in the same tilt position. We can go hit the menu button again and go to lock. Now it's almost like a tripod. It doesn't really matter how we move the gimbal, it stays locked on to that position where we activated the lock mode. And then we have follow. So follow will follow your pan mode. It'll also follow your tilt movements. So anytime you pan or tilt, you'll follow that motion. So that's quite nice. Then you can also double tap that mode button. By double tapping it, you go into POV mode. In POV mode, your camera kind of acts like an FPV drone. It follows your roll movements and tilt and everything, and it gives a kind of cool look if you're running around using the camera like that, as you can see in this shot right here. You can double tap the mode button again to go into vortex mode, and essentially what that does is tilt the camera all the way forward, and then using the joystick you can tilt the camera around either clockwise or anti-clockwise, and you can get a really cool vortex shot, which is just a fun and creative shot to play with sometimes. And then you can double tap to put your camera in portrait mode, and what that does is it turns the camera 90 degrees so you can shoot vertical content. This is great if you need to quickly get a vertical shot while you're out shooting 16:9 content. But if you shoot a lot of vertical content, then I recommend sliding this plate off and mounting it vertically so that you can shoot vertical content. To do that, I'm just going to hold the menu button. That'll put the gimbal to sleep. All you need to do is unlock this plate and slide it off the end. And then you'll see this base plate has another mount over here. You can just slide that on like that and mount the camera vertically. You would obviously need to go ahead and rebalance the gimbal, but the rebalancing is minimal. It'll take you a minute, maybe two at most, to get this gimbal balanced again. And then I can press and hold the mode button to bring the gimbal back out of sleep mode. One last mode that's also pretty cool is if you triple tap the trigger, the camera will spin around to face you. So if you're a vlogger with very strong arms, you can vlog with a gimbal. That's also quite a nice option to have. What I love about this gimbal is that the form factor of this is really small. So I can balance the gimbal at home the day before a shoot. I can remove the camera, lock all the axes, and remove the little tripod, and it goes right into my bag, which is not really a big bag either, by the way. This makes it really easy to just mount the camera and start shooting without having to balance all of the axes. Zhiyun also sent me this master move accessory, which is a really nice thing to have. You basically screw the little base plate into the bottom of the gimbal, and then you can slide that into this master move accessory and lock it down. And then what's nice is you can still add the little tripod in at the bottom. So I'll just slide that in, or screw that in, and we've got a really compact setup that offers two great things. The first is this wrist support. So you can adjust that using this dial. You can adjust it up or down. And what that allows you to do is support the weight of the gimbal and the camera with your wrist. So if you're shooting one-handed, you have this nice bit of extra support, and it's got a handle. The handle's great because you can go into an underslung mode really easily, and you can also adjust that if you want to pull it out to the side rather, and use this as like a two-hand setup. The handle is extendable, so you can use it like that, which is really nice. The only thing is, it is a little bit expensive. So if you add that to the cost of the gimbal, it now becomes a little bit more expensive. But having said that, the gimbal is really light as it is without the accessory, so you can get around shooting one-handed if you need to without the support. But I find it really helpful for long shoot days. Let's talk about some cons. This is a budget gimbal, so it doesn't have certain features like image transmission or focus control. But for me personally, I never need to transmit the image to any sort of monitor, and I also don't need to pull focus because I don't use manual lenses. However, if those are things you need, then this gimbal might not be for you. For me personally, it's not an issue at all. With everything that this little gimbal is capable of, the build quality, and most importantly, how smooth the footage is when using it, I can highly recommend this to you if you're in the market for a gimbal, especially for a budget gimbal. If you have any questions about it or there's anything you'd like to know, please drop a comment down below and I'll respond to all of them. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one.